Well, America is at war with Iran. It's technically unofficial since Congress has not declared war, but the president is using his wide war powers to attack Iran in a way that is supposedly, according to the president and other reports, going to be massive and widespread. This isn't like the original hit that was done back in June of last year. This is going to be much, much bigger. We'll see how long it lasts. Pray for our troops, pray for our nation, pray for the Iranian people. This is an opportunity, as President Trump declared in his speech, which I'm about to play. He said that this is an opportunity that maybe their last opportunity in generations, is how he put it. And that's probably true. I mean, if they are to break free from the Ayatollah, from the Iranian regime, then this may be their best chance of doing that. Let's go ahead and play President Trump's speech, and then on the flip side, I'll give you my thoughts.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels and international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Well, what did you think? I mean, certainly seems like this is a not just a defensive war to stop them from acquiring nuclear weapons or to cease terrorism. This seems to be very clearly a regime change operation. Now, it's very, very important that we don't say war, right? Because then, he can't declare war. He's not allowed to. He can engage in this type of operation, and as he describes it, a major combat operation in Iran, according to an article that we have posted over at discern.tv. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will hit on the bullet points, and then you can read it yourself. Article's titled, Trump declares major combat operations in Iran have begun. President Trump announced at 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday that the United States military began major combat operations in Iran, declaring the objective as defending the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime and reiterating that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. This is the predicate upon which the president is able to act. If there is an immediate threat, and if that threat appears to be the development of a nuclear weapon, then he has limited, but I mean, he has the power to attack. He cannot declare war. Congress can declare war, but he does have a certain period of time. I believe it's 180 days, if I recall, a certain period of time in which he is able to engage in military activities to quash an immediate threat. And pretty much every president ever since the powers were granted has utilized this to some extent. Now that President Trump has, I should say, he hadn't before. He is now. So there's that. But again, cannot declare war. But let's face it, we're at war. Explosions were confirmed across multiple Iranian cities simultaneously, including central and eastern Tehran, Isfahan, Karaj, and Kermanshah, with AFP journalists on the ground in Tehran observing at least 2 large blasts and thick plumes of smoke rising over the capital. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared a full nationwide state of emergency, shut down Israel's entire civilian airspace, ordered civilians to remain near bomb shelters, and described the joint operation as a, quote, preemptive strike to, quote, remove threats to the state of Israel, with a senior Israeli security official warning the public that Iran's retaliation will be substantial and lethal. And that is almost certainly true. They're no slouch. Okay, they have a lot of weapons. They have a lot of support from both Russia and China. This is not going to be an easy war, which is why we have 2, not just 1, we have 2 carrier strike groups in the region. They're treating this with more urgency than even the first Gulf War, as far as the initial amount of firepower, not ground troops, but firepower available through the strike groups in the region. Back to the article. The operation follows the first Israel-Iran war of June 2025, in which Israel's Operation Rising Lion eliminated Iran's top military leadership, and the U.S. followed with Operation Midnight Hammer, striking Iran's nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan with B-2 stealth bombers and Tomahawk missiles, after which a ceasefire was brokered but immediately violated by Iran's accelerated rebuilding efforts. Iran used the post-ceasefire period to construct deeper, hardened nuclear sites, pour reinforced concrete over damaged facilities, accelerate construction at a buried site near Natanz, and reconstitute its ballistic missile stockpile to near pre-war levels, all while blocking IAEA inspectors from its most sensitive nuclear sites for 9 consecutive months. We had basically 3 requirements, three needs for there to be peace. Okay, Marco Rubio declared this very clearly. We want the Iran nuclear program to completely cease. Get rid of all of your enriched uranium. Russia raised their hand and said, we'll take it. Okay. Number 2, stop building ballistic missiles that can reach pretty much anywhere in the Middle East. They can reach Europe. And President Trump says that they had been in development during the State of the Union address. He said that they were developing missiles that could even reach the United States. That has been contested. I don't know if that is how accurate that is, but again, the ability when it comes to ballistic missiles, the ability to reach anywhere pretty much in the world is just a matter of fuel, right? And so if they can reach Europe the way that they currently can, then even though the United States is much further away, it's definitely possible that they weren't very far off from having missiles that could reach the shores of the United States. Just saying. The third criteria was to cease their funding of terrorism. So 3 things. No nukes, slow down, stop building more ballistic missiles, and stop being terrorists. And Iran balked at the first 2 and didn't say anything about the third. They said, we will slow down, but we still want civilian nuclear power. And they said, we're not touching anything with ballistic missiles, buzz off. And they didn't even acknowledge that they are the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world. So, yeah, we were at an impasse. According back to the article, President Trump issued I'm sorry, got lost. Trump's 10-day ultimatum issued on February 19th expired without a deal after 3 rounds of talks in Oman and Geneva collapsed. Iran refused to transfer its highly enriched uranium stockpile abroad and would not discuss its ballistic missiles program under any framework, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio calling that refusal a big, big problem. Yeah, it was. The warning signs in the 72 hours before the strikes were unambiguous. Britain withdrew its entire Tehran embassy staff. Turkey canceled all flights to Iran. U.S. authorized diplomatic families to leave Israel and Lebanon. And 2 American carrier strike groups were pre-positioned in the region, and U.S. Air Force refueling aircraft were photographed at Ben Gurion Airport days before the operation began. Iran's retaliatory capacity remains real and dangerous. It struck Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar during the first conflict, has rebuilt its medium-range missiles stockpiles to pre-war levels, and commands active proxy forces throughout Hezbollah in Lebanon, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen, all of whom have already issued fresh threats in response to Saturday's strikes. Unlike Operation Midnight Hammer, which was a targeted one-night strike on nuclear infrastructure, Trump's declaration of, quote, major combat operations signals an ongoing large-scale campaign, one that analysts say is likely designed to overwhelm Iran's missile production facilities, launchers, stockpiles, and air defense systems before the regime can fully organize its response. We're framing this. The article that we have over at Discern TV is framing Saturday's strikes as the inevitable result of Iran's repeated exploitation of diplomatic frameworks to buy time. This is how they operate. They are liars. Now, I'm not trying to justify the attack. I'm not trying to justify any of this. I'm just telling you that from the Trump administration's perspective, from the Netanyahu administration's perspective, they were just stalling. They have always just been stalling. And to be clear, this is not just, something that Iran is capable of doing. Okay, they are, based upon their faith, their religion, they must lie to infidels. They must lie to Israel and the United States and the United Nations and everybody else in order to gain an advantage. That's what they're told to do. It's not something where, oh, you're given permission. No, you lie. You do whatever it takes. You kidnap, you rape, you murder, you steal, and you lie to get the infidels. Again, not justifying. I'm just saying that anyone who thought, well, they were really working towards peace. No, they were stalling. Period. Anyway, they were buying time from the 2015 JCPOA to the June 2025 ceasefire, arguing that the Trump administration's ultimately concluded that allowing Iran to continue rebuilding its nuclear program and reconstituting its arsenal was a risk no longer acceptable to American national security. So that's all up front. Okay, that's all about, what this is the official position the White House must take in order to have the power to do this. So they can't say we need to that the Ayatollah is an immediate threat and we have to go after him. It's not like the Nicolas Maduro situation, because that was a criminal operation. Okay, that was the Department of Justice utilizing the military to go after an indicted criminal. That's the way that they were able to defend that. They can't do the same thing with, Iran is dangerous, the Ayatollah is evil, so we're going to go after him. If that's the scenario, then they have to declare war, and they have to do that through Congress. But because there is an imminent threat, that, as the White House is putting it, being the risk of Iran building nuclear weapons and being able to hit the United States of America, that's the predicate upon which the president is able to make these attacks. Now, of course, you're going to get the Democrats and some Republicans are going to push back and say, no, you can't do this. This is war. This is not just an isolated strike, but he does have the power to go, at least I believe it's 180 days, an operation that can go much longer than what he did back in June of last year. So we will see what happens. We must pray for our troops. To be clear, Whether you agree with President Trump's actions or not, you still must pray for our troops. Don't be like Democrats. Don't be like the leftists who, well, we disagree with it, so we're not going to support it in any way. You might disagree with it happening, but it's happened, so now we back our president. That's what we have to do. Okay, he's not going to stop. Okay, you can criticize him. I'm not saying don't criticize him if you disagree with the action, but still pray for our troops. By golly, pray for all Americans in the region because they are all now at risk as a result of this action. Now, from a biblical perspective, this does obviously bring up, are we looking at something that could lead to Ezekiel 38 and 39? There are only two nations. We know of Gog of Magog. We know what's called Sudan, which is not Sudan. We know what's called Ethiopia, which is not modern day Ethiopia. But there are two nations that are mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that we do have a certainty of who they are. One of them is Israel, of course, and the other one is Persia, which is modern day Iran. That is not in doubt. There's no question that modern day Iran, if the prophecy pertains to today or in the near future, that the Syria described in the prophecy that attacks Israel is going to be modern day Iran. And we could be seeing the beginning of that. It could be way off, okay? It could be years off. It could be decades off. It could be 1,000 years off. Okay, we don't know for sure until it happens. But keep your eyes open, and remember that no matter what, this is crazy. You could agree, disagree. You could do whatever you want and think however you want. But at the end of the day, if you are a Bible believing Christian, we know that everything that happens, particularly what happens in the Middle East, is guided by God. It is His will that allows these things to happen, and this attack, this war, which really is what it is, this war is part of the plan. So I don't sweat it. I don't get all bent out of shape and start protesting this, that, or the other, or start cheering for this, that, or the other. I just want to watch, see what happens, pray for our troops, pray for the people in the Middle East, pray for Iranians, hope that they are able to take advantage of this. Again, whether you agree with the strike or not, this does pose an opportunity for the Iranian people to finally get rid of the regime. And for the first, as President Trump noted, this may be their last opportunity to do so. If the Ayatollah can be taken out in some form or fashion, whether that's, force him into a bunker with no communication or force him out of the nation or eliminate him altogether, this is a possible way for the Iranian people to finally be free of the Islamic regime. They want a secular government. They want a democracy. And different from other nations that have been engaged in American or any other country forcing regime change, this one might actually, I know it's crazy to think, but this one might actually be a positive one. So we will see. Pray for everybody involved because things are getting crazy out there, folks. Stay frosty. Stay frosty.
The best coffee out there is from a Christian company. Go to patriot.tv/coffee and lock in.
I'm already hearing plenty of America First patriots complaining about President Trump saying that they're working on a friendly takeover of Cuba, as he put it. That is a concern because we have our own problems here. Why do we have to solve everybody else's problems? The America First crowd, we are rightly annoyed when we're talking about things that aren't necessarily America First. You could talk about Greenland. There's benefits. Just not sure if we want to be messing with Greenland when we have affordability issues here in the United States. You could talk about the strategic benefits of Taiwan. You could talk about, obviously, Venezuela. We've got to do something there now that we're in there. But what about Cuba? What makes Cuba different? I think it is different, and I'm fully supportive in this particular case because of what I don't like to admit is the John Bolton fear. Now, I'm not a fan of John Bolton. Dude's an idiot. He's a neocon. He's a warmonger. He's part of the military-industrial complex, and he is as anti-Trump and as anti-American as he gets. I don't think his heart is, by the way. I think that he just has such a skewed worldview that makes him unintentionally anti-American as a result. We'll just put it like that. But he's been concerned about Cuba for over 2 decades, and I don't disagree with his concern. I disagree with the way that he manifests his concerns. Okay, I don't trust him, but he's right. Cuba is 90 miles from the United States. They are very, very close to both Russia and China, and and if it's possible to get a hold of them without losing anything, I'm okay with that. I really am. I know. Oh, you're a neocon. No, no. Oh, you're an imperialist. Definitely not. It's just practical. 90 miles. If and when we have a future war with either China, Russia, or both, they will view their partnership, friendship, whatever you want to call it, ownership of Cuba as a very important strategic position, and we will be kicking ourselves for not taking advantage of an opportunity to disrupt that immediately. Article I have over at AmericaFirstReport.com. President Trump floats, quote, friendly takeover of Cuba to mitigate their current debacles. Now, I worded it like that. The headline that was sent to me was very different. I worded it like that because that's how it's being positioned. This isn't being positioned necessarily as under the guise of geopolitical risk, or that, hey, we're going to make a lot of money off of it. If it's going to happen, it has to happen with the understanding that they're hurting, they're 90 miles from us, and we can hop in there. Basically, it's a fire sale, no pun intended. We can get control of Cuba in a way that may be similar to the way that we have control of Puerto Rico, and that would do a lot of good things, not just for the Cubans, okay, but also for America. Let's dive into the bullet points. You can find this story over at AmericaFirstReport.com if you want to read the whole thing, but we're going to touch on some of the bullets here now. President Donald Trump announced on Friday that the U.S. is in negotiations with Cuba, potentially leading to a, quote, friendly takeover of the communist nation just 90 miles from Florida. Trump described Cuba as being in severe economic distress. He said, no money, no anything right now. And this is due, of course, to the U.S. sanctions, fuel shortages, blackouts, and the loss of Venezuelan oil support after Nicolas Maduro was ousted. The proposal emphasizes a negotiated, non-military transition to end over 60 years of communist rule, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio leading high-level talks to advance America's interests and national security. And for obvious reasons, Marco Rubio is the right person to be leading these negotiations. Trump highlighted benefits for the Cuban exile community in the U.S., particularly in Florida, who could return home under a free government, calling it something good, something very positive for them. And it's true. We do have a lot of patriotic. You want to see patriotism for America, okay? That comes from foreigners who become citizens here. Talk to a Cuban American. Talk to a Cuban American who fled Cuba, and many times even their children, who have fled Cuba, come to the United States. They appreciate being here. They fully integrate and assimilate. They become Americans with a Cuban heritage. And I don't want to generalize and say all of them do. You know, I'm sure there's plenty that don't. I'm just saying that pretty much every Cuban American that I know, they don't fly a Cuban flag, not by any means. They fly an American flag. They love being in America. They want to defend America in any way they can. They're against illegal immigration. In many ways, they're against they're against Cuba, first and foremost, because not that they're not proud of their home nation, but the Cuban regime, they vehemently oppose it. So this will benefit them. A lot of them want to go home. A lot of them still have family. So yeah, there's a positive benefit for them. This is poetic justice against the Castro regime's history of exporting revolution, harboring terrorists, which they do. You know, Cuba's the first, other than Mexico, Cuba's the first place that terrorists go if they're trying to hide away, if they're ever caught or pursued, I should say. And aligning with U.S. adversaries like the former Soviet Union, and then today with China and Russia. Past democratic efforts, think about Obama, for example, are criticized for emboldening dictators without helping the Cuban people, while Trump's approach uses economic pressure to force peaceful change. A post-communist Cuba could feature free elections, restored private property, U.S. investments, and prosperity, sending a strong message that socialism fails and American resolve can topple it without bloodshed. Left-wing critics will label it as imperialism, but the piece counters, this article counters, that true oppression came from the regime itself. And Trump's offer represents generous empowerment of freedom-loving Cubans. This aligns with the America First agenda for securing this hemisphere, especially one, a nation that is so close to us, confronting threats and promoting liberty, potentially becoming a legacy-defining achievement in his second term, and it would be. The regime's desperation makes change possible, and the article argues seizing the moment to make Cuba great again through a triumphant, peaceful return to freedom. That's what we should want. And again, this isn't just for Cubans. There is a lot of development, a lot that can be done in Cuba, but by American companies. Yeah, think about, I don't want to generalize, but think about just a bigger and potentially more fruitful version of Puerto Rico. Nothing against Puerto Rico or Puerto Ricans, okay? But Cuba just has more to offer. There's a greater potential to build, a greater potential to introduce capitalism. Don't forget, some of the best capitalists in the world have come from places that were socialists, even places that currently still are. Some of the best capitalists are right there in communist China. Okay, that's why China is not a true communist country. They're run by a communist regime, of course, the Chinese Communist Party, but they all practice the majority of Chinese people practice a variation of capitalism that is making them very quickly into, and has been making them very quickly into, a powerhouse for the last 20 years. And you look at Russia. Russia was on the verge of absolute total collapse once the Soviet Union collapsed, but the nation of Russia itself was able to bounce back. Why? Capitalism. They're very good at it. If they can survive through socialism, they can thrive in capitalism. And I think the same thing can be said about what's going to happen with Cuba if this deal goes through. Now, to be clear, I don't want to give away anything, okay? I don't want to get into any financial quagmires, any liabilities. I just want all the positive. And right now, the way that the pressure is being applied by the sanctions and with the loss of Venezuelan oil, Cuba is ripe for this change. Now, to be clear, it's not like, we cut off the valve and that toppled them. No, they were already struggling. They were hurting badly. The nation of Cuba was in very poor shape before all of the negatives that were applied by the United States, by the Trump administration, especially the Venezuela oil cutoff, which he's willing to sell them oil, basically. He's like, look, you can buy Venezuelan oil. You're just going to buy it from us. So we will see how they react. They may have already reacted. The deal might be in the works by the time you're watching this or listening to this. We'll see. Point being is this. I don't like to intervene anywhere, generally speaking. It's funny because the last few shows I've talked about areas, the very, very tiny, rare times when I'm okay with a variation of regime change. In this case, taking a government that has been vehemently opposed to the United States, a government that has promoted terrorism and harbored terrorists, a nation that is 90 miles off our coast and that is currently cozied up to our potential future military kinetic enemies in Russia and China. We have an opportunity right now to have a friendly, non-military takeover of Cuba. I hope we can take advantage of it.
I've treated trauma in war zones, car accidents, backcountry rescues, you name it. And I often had to rely on inferior equipment. So when the folks at Jace Medical offered to help me build the medical kits I'd always dreamed of, I jumped at the chance. Let's start with the Jace Medic Kit. It's laid out for fast, intuitive access. It even includes a dedicated slot for the Jace case, your emergency supply of antibiotics. Next is the Jace Trauma Kit. This is for the most serious injuries, massive bleeding, chest wounds, burns, blunt trauma. We've also included a powerful lineup of over-the-counter and prescription medications. For everyday injuries, this is the Jace Aid Kit, your glove box, backpack, kitchen drawer essential. Compact, rugged, and packed with high-quality supplies. It's the first rugged kit combining prescription meds and premium first aid gear.
Visit patriot.tv/kit. That's patriot.tv/kit to get the only med kit on the market designed for real-world emergencies.
Democrats are using a false premise and a false methodology in order to harm the Trump administration and thereby harm America. This really just comes down to that. And it's funny because an article we have posted over at discernreport.com doesn't touch on what I consider to be the biggest reason the Democrats are doing this. They want to harm the economy. And the way they do that is through this partial government shutdown. You might say, oh, but it's not like the last shutdown where so many departments, this just covers DHS and not even all of DHS. Well, guess what, folks? You're going to start feeling the pain from this at some point in the future. Whether if it doesn't switch up, if they don't end the shutdown soon, we're going to start feeling it at the airport during travel with TSA not being funded, feeling it. If there's a disaster, we're coming up on hurricane season, coming up on all sorts of things, tornado season. And you're going to want FEMA there. I'm not a fan of FEMA, but they are necessary, especially under President Trump. They've been doing a much better job, so I don't want to just rip on the agency altogether. But yeah, you're going to feel it one way or the other. Plus, there's the buying power, the purchasing power of a whole bunch of people not being used because they don't know when they're going to get the next paycheck because Democrats are holding them hostage and thereby holding us hostage, which brings me to the article we have posted over at discernreport.com. You can check it out. And you can read it yourself. I'm not going to read it to you, but I will go over some of the points. Democrats are holding DHS hostage over ICE reform, and Americans are paying the price, according to the article. Senate Democrats triggered a partial DHS shutdown on February 14th by blocking a full-year funding bill demanding sweeping ICE reforms as the price of restored funding, marking the third government funding lapse of the current Congress and the second in less than 6 months. Every time there's a shutdown, every time there's a lapse in payments of any sort, anytime the Democrats disrupt the financial standing of the United States of America, they're doing damage to the economy. They're helping to raise inflation. They're helping to decrease affordability. They're harming you and me. And they know it. They want you to feel the pain. They don't want you to be happy, because if you're happy going into midterm elections, if you think, oh, the economy's doing great, you're going to vote for the people that are helping to make it great. And that's President Trump and the Republican Party. But by disrupting the economy in the way that they do, the way they're doing now, the way they have been doing, they're just trying to get votes. They're literally making you suffer to try to get votes ahead of the midterm election. It's sad. It's sick. It's disgusting. And I'm not saying Republicans aren't above that. But Democrats, they really do carry the lion's share when it comes to a willingness to harm Americans for the sake of acquiring power. Disgusting. The standoff traces back to Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis, where federal agents shot and killed 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Pretty, prompting Democrats to convert public outrage into a political ultimatum. And that's properly worded, okay? It's not that Democrats care about Renee Good or Alex Pretty. They don't. They were happy. I don't want to accuse people of being evil, but I'm pretty sure that many of them, I don't want to say who or what, or because I don't know, but some of them were actually pleased by the deaths of these people because it helps them to make a political point. I cannot stress enough. There's a gap. There's a very serious gap, and I can trace it back to their lack of understanding of faith and their unwillingness to embrace biblical principles. And it's become so much more rampant amongst Democrats. I'm not saying that Republicans are saints by any means, okay? But if you have 100 Republicans and 100 Democrats, you're going to find far more Republicans who are driven by their faith than you will of Democrats. It's just how it is. The shutdown strategy has a built-in contradiction. And it always has, to be clear. This isn't news to them. They knew this. ICE and CBP, that's Customs and Border Protection, are fully shielded from its effects, having received roughly $75 billion and $64 billion respectively through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, meaning the shutdown cannot touch the agencies that Democrats claim to be targeting. It makes no sense. This makes about as much sense as attacking Iraq for a terrorist attack that was committed by Saudi Arabia. Okay, don't get me started down that road. The agencies actually going without are TSA, FEMA, Coast Guard, and CISA, none of which played any role in Minneapolis. TSA workers face partial paychecks on February 28th and will fully miss their paychecks on March 14th, with some already sleeping in cars and selling plasma. Now, I'm not a fan of TSA. I would rather just privatize the whole thing. Maybe this can prompt that. Maybe we should just privatize Privatize TSA altogether. Privatize it all. That's what I say. Let's get big government out of the picture. Shut down all these agencies and make them all private. They will all operate better. Not the Coast Guard. Coast Guard we can keep, but FEMA that should be private. TSA definitely should be private. Anyway, TSA Democrats' demands span 10 items from the broadly acceptable, such as body cameras, standardized uniforms. Oh, that all makes sense. Okay, I'm down with that. Body cameras would help ICE agents. It would help them to gather evidence. But whatever. So let's do those demands. But there are other demands that are absurd, or as they put it, operationally disruptive, such as banning agent masks. Let's put people in danger. You didn't see any of these Democrats saying, "Oh, let's ban masks of the Antifa BLM rioters that all wore masks back in their rioting days." You didn't hear them saying, "Oh, they shouldn't be wearing masks." They want them to wear masks because they want these people exposed. They want our heroes in ICE exposed so that they can be attacked. That's literally the only reason. It's like, oh, well, we don't want them attacked. Well, why do you want their masks off? Because they need to be identified. Why? Well, so that they could be attacked. They won't admit it, but that's really what they want. That's why they want to unmask them. They want them to be scared, concerned for their own families, which they already are, and they should be. Because they are. The threat level has risen, like 8,000%? It's because of Democrats. I am not a huge fan of the Republican Party, to be clear. Okay? I've been turned off by the GOP for well over a decade. But my golly, the whole lesser of two evils, it's not even close. Okay? The Republicans are feckless. Republicans are weak in many cases. They're too easy to bully, right? But the majority of Democrats on Capitol Hill, within government at all, bureaucrats, judges, okay, state legislators, state governors, mayors, majority of these Democrats that are either have run for public office or have been given a bureaucratic role, they are just awful human beings. I mean, it wasn't always like this. For you young folks out there in the audience, there was a time when Democrats were oftentimes okay. I mean, seriously. You want to see what an old school Democrat looks like? John Fetterman, okay? I don't like or trust John Fetterman, to be clear. I like him. I guess he's kind of likable, but I don't trust him. I don't think people say, "Oh, he should be a Republican." No, he's still definitely a Democrat. He's just not insane. Or it doesn't, at least he doesn't act insane like the rest of his cohorts. But that's what I would say over 50% of Democrat lawmakers and bureaucrats back 2-3 decades ago, that's how they acted. Sure, they had their occasional wacky idea, but you even had people like Joe Biden and Bill Clinton, and even, believe it or not, Barack Obama in the early days, talking about how the importance of border security, the importance of deporting criminal illegal aliens. Now all of a sudden it's like, no, they couldn't. Scott Jennings had a Democrat analyst on, or it wasn't his show, but he was talking to a Democrat analyst who was unwilling to acknowledge that anyone, that a single illegal alien, no matter what the crime, he would not acknowledge that a murdering rapist of children should be deported. They don't want any of them deported. They want to keep every single one of them. They don't even want them incarcerated. They want the most vile and hideous illegal aliens out on the streets. As long as they're not in their neighborhoods, they don't care. Okay, again, they're willing to use people as if they're livestock. Republicans have their problems, but by golly, their problems do not equate to pure, just hideous evil. I digress. Talks have stalled sharply with Majority Leader Thune, calling the White House's offer pretty close to a deal with Minority Leader Schumer, which he actually dismissed and said that they're not serious, plain and simple, with only Senator John Fetterman breaking Democrat ranks to vote for the funding. A second Senate vote on February 24th failed 50-45, well short of the 60 vote threshold. Let's get rid of the filibuster. Excuse me, what was that? As lawmakers returned from a week-long recess only to leave again empty-handed because they just don't do a lot of work. That's the current Republican Party that pisses me off. If I were John Thune, session 24/7, okay? Until we get this passed, everybody's here. I mean, my gosh. And the Save America Act, for that matter. Timing compounds the damage. TSA and the Secret Service are preparing for a 2026 World Cup, and America 250. Now, one can argue that this whole, this summer, we have a grand summer ahead of us. Okay, there's a lot of action that's going to be happening here in the United States of America. You're going to want the Coast Guard. You're going to want TSA for sure. You might need FEMA. You need it all. You need all hands on deck to make sure that all of this goes smoothly. And Democrats don't want it to go smoothly. They want it to be disastrous. And again, I go back to, it's just because the ones in office, they just want the votes. They'll do anything. They'll sacrifice any of you or me to get votes. They're animals. FEMA is approaching hurricane season, mid-recovery, and CISA is hardening election infrastructure ahead of midterms, all degraded by a workforce going unpaid. The administration has already made unilateral adjustments, replacing a field commander. They've sent in Tom Homan to replace Greg Bovino. Deploying body cameras. That was in action before any of this started. They pulled 700 officers from Minnesota. That all happened before all this started. Before any of these deals were reached, undercutting the argument that a shutdown is necessary to force change. They can force change. They can force change. They don't have to do it through a shutdown. But again, if they were to negotiate change, they wouldn't get the extra benefit of harming Americans by helping to try to destroy the economy ahead of the midterms. They will sacrifice you. They're willing to harm the United States of America for a few extra votes. Again, I just cannot. Democrats have options. They really do. They have lawsuits. They can file legislation to put Republicans on record. That could help them, right? If they take some populist perspectives, leftist populist perspectives on ICE and try to throw up some legislation, get the Republicans on record and voting against it. That'll help, right? There's a lot they can do. They can call for they can still ask questions. There's a lot they can do to negotiate, and they've already demonstrated that it can work. The court of public opinion is open to them. They're losing that. There's only one benefit from any of this. It's that they're losing the narrative. Okay? There was a recent CNN poll just the other day. It might have been yesterday, as a matter of fact. Recent CNN poll that showed Democrats are losing the plot when it comes to immigration. They keep pushing this. It's like, oh, everybody hates ICE. No, not everybody hates ICE. Okay? They're like, oh my gosh, the public perception on immigration enforcement is down. It is down. It's down by like 11 points. But there's no hatred for ICE here. Okay? That's relegated to just the far left. A majority of Americans do want deportations. A vast majority of Americans want criminal illegal aliens deported. That's what ICE is trying to do. If the Trump administration and House Republicans and Senate Republicans really want to get stuff done, they need to make the case to the American people that this isn't just about, the Renee Goods and Alex Preddies of the world. There are people that are harmed. And President Trump, to his benefit, or to his credit, he has been trying to do that, but he needs everybody to do that. He needs everybody to make the case for why ICE is doing a fantastic job. Need to get Tom Homan out there a lot. Need to keep keep some of the other people off the air. Won't mention too many names, Pam Bondi. But yeah, just focus on getting the message out. That'll help you with the midterms, and it will help to put pressure on Democrats to end the shutdown. If they can do that, maybe we can salvage this before these servants, because that's what they are. They're serving the American people. Again, I'm not a fan of TSA, but I have nothing against TSA agents. Okay, they're just people doing their job, and they should get paid for doing their job. Tell the Democrats to end the shutdown. The insurance you need to protect your American dream. That's the tagline for my great friends over at America First Healthcare. You can find out more for yourself. You can reach them by going to patriot.tv/health, patriot.tv/health. Check them out, see what they offer. whether it's for health, for life, for business insurance. They do a fantastic job. But that's just me saying it. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them through that link, talk to them, and see what they can do for you. Because look, we can say, oh, great, it's awesome. They're America First company and blah 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 blah. They have their shared values and all that. That's great, right? It really is. But is it better? I mean, we're not going to be getting worse coverage just because we can they might give us worse coverage, but by golly, they promote America. That's that's just not going to happen. We are practical people, my audience here at Patriot TV. But with that said, they claim, and I would encourage you to research it, but they claim that they actually have better coverage than what you get through the government-controlled healthcare systems or even many of the private healthcare offerings out there. And more importantly, perhaps for some of you, they offer better rates. With according to their website, with thousands of insurance plans to choose from, it can feel overwhelming to find the right plan at the right price. At America First Healthcare, we take a holistic approach to make sure we find the best coverage for your exact needs. We get you better rates by helping you choose the right type and amount of coverage. Then we shop around for the best results. They can save you up to 20% on the coverage. Who couldn't use? I know we're most of us, the vast majority of us, are paying. I mean, compared to what we used to pay, my goodness, we're paying a lot. 20% right off the top. That would be a huge benefit. So reach out to my good friends over at America First Healthcare. Go to patriot.tv/health. Patriot.tv/health. Those of us who have supported President Donald J. Trump and HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in their quest to make America healthy again were betrayed this week when the president signed an executive order granting immunity to big ag companies that use glyphosate as their pesticide. This took a lot of people by surprise. I know it shocked me, and I was expecting to hear more about it. There's been a little bit of talk, but so far it really is just coming out of the Maha movement, the negative press. There are some on the conservative right who are speaking out about it, but for the most part, I would say there was a mixture of some celebrating it, saying, yay, we're protecting our food, protecting our farmers. There were others that just flat out ignored it because it went against President Trump. We're not going to ignore it. Now, before I get into this segment, I have to be very clear. I am not a doctor. I am not a farmer. I am not a politician. So what do I know about any of this stuff? In reality, I know quite a bit about it because I've been studying it since long before Maha was formed, long before it was really, I guess, popular to eat organic, to support regenerative farming, to oppose the chemicals that are pumped into our food and thereby pumped into our systems when we eat them. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's dive into it, shall we? I have an article over at basedunderground.com that explains what's happened. I'm not going to dive in too much into the details other than give you the highlights that are necessary. You can always go to basedunderground.com and read the full article. It's titled, Yes, President Trump's Embrace of Glyphosate is a Betrayal, even if it helps farmers. And even if it helps the food supply, allegedly helps the food supply. And to be clear, this is, oh no, now he's going against Trump. I'm not against Trump. This is bad. It's a hiccup. Okay. And I'm never going to agree with everything anybody does, especially a politician. And yes, President Trump is a politician. Maybe he's different. He's definitely is different from others, but that doesn't mean that he's immune to the pressures that are put upon him, including those coming from big ag. As we noted in the highlights of the article, President Trump's executive order invokes the Defense Production Act to classify glyphosate-based herbicides an essential for, quote-unquote, national defense, shielding producers like Bayer from most civil lawsuits and ramping up domestic production. Now, this happened literally on the day that a settlement was reached. I think it was for approximately $7.2 billion. It wasn't just a massive amount of money. It was big. Okay, that's a lot of money. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, that's going to change millions of lives. No, it's not. And for those who aren't aware, there's approximately 700,000 plaintiffs that are in the process of suing, and apparently I guess they're not going to be able to move forward. 700,000 people. And that's just that are involved in lawsuits. What about the millions, tens of millions of people who are suffering, whether they know it or not, from the use of glyphosate, which is prominent, of course, in Roundup. Let's get back to the article, though. The move is framed as protecting America's food supply chain by preventing immediate disruptions to farmers heavily dependent on glyphosate for high-yield crops such as corn and soybeans. Decades of federal policy have locked U.S. agriculture into a chemical-dependent model, making abrupt restrictions potentially devastating to many operations and food prices. Now, this is all true, okay? Number one, this isn't something that Trump created. He's trying to fix it in his own way. Number two, yes, it would, if they were to, say, ban glyphosate tomorrow, the U.S. food supply would not survive. We would all go hungry. We would have to depend on others, and they will jack up the prices, and we would collapse overnight if they were to ban glyphosate altogether, okay? We just couldn't survive it. But that doesn't mean that we have to support it, as President Trump has done. And it does mean that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's now on tour, it's an apology tour, saying, hey, guys, calm down. We're going to still try to do some good things, but we got to protect the farmers. Farmers will shut down overnight if we were to do anything sudden with glyphosate. Again, this is true. But what I'm not hearing, and what should have been attached to, or even one right after another, right? Just boom, boom. Number one, fine, glyphosate, give immunity to those guys because we got to protect our food supply. We got to protect our farmers. We got to protect Big Ag and their money. They wouldn't say that part out loud. But then immediately afterwards, there should have been an executive order saying, but we are also moving forward with plans to basically, the easiest way to put it is to wean ourselves off Roundup, to move the farmers, as many as possible, perhaps all of them over time, but to move towards a glyphosate-free farming environment, which would require, for those who aren't aware, you can use natural herbicides. You can go with regenerative farming. There's these new, if you haven't seen the videos, I don't have one handy, but if you haven't seen the videos of those robot, I don't know what they are. They're on wheels. They go through the fields and they start zapping bugs with lights. At first I thought it was like AI generated. It's like, no, that's real. They really are going through. And I mean, it's not like zzz, zzz, it's not like one of those zapper thingies. No, I mean, it's like scanning with these lights, and then all of a sudden and they're just zapping all the bugs. I'll take laser zapped food over chemically ridden food any day. I love the smell of laser zapped food in the morning. That should have been the companion to this executive order. And it still can be. They just have to act fast. Don't just don't give them immunity and then send RFK Jr. out there for damage control. You want to give them immunity. You want to protect food prices, because that's really what it's about. Protecting the food supply is about keeping prices low now, ahead of the midterm elections. Keeping prices as low as possible so that they don't blow up. Because again, if glyphosate were to be banned, then there would be an immediate doubling, tripling, quadrupling of prices. We would turn into Iran or old Venezuela very, very quickly. And we're not prepared for that. We could not survive it as a nation. Okay. We have a whole bunch of strengths, but one of those strengths that we don't have is adversity or I guess you could say resilience under extreme adversity, such as food prices skyrocketing. It would turn into pandemonium. So fine. I would rather there not have been an executive order, just let things go. Okay. It's not like $7.2 billion is going to, paid out by Bear is going to raise food prices a bunch. Just let that all play out. That's what I would have wanted to happen. That's why I consider it a betrayal that they acted at all. The opposite, the extreme. I'm not calling for that. I'm not calling for an immediate ban, but there should be a weaning off period. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen how effective it can be in the the electric vehicle movement. Now, granted, it failed because the concept failed, but notice how they're at least allocating money to put up chargers. They were getting more people to buy electric vehicles and this, that, and the other. You can do the same thing with agriculture. You can say, look, fine, you want your non-organic, non-regenerative farm, you can keep it for now, but we want something in place to ease us off of that. Just like they were trying to ease us off of gas cars, we could ease the farmers off of glyphosate. That's what should happen, and that should have been, again, what the companion executive order was. Back to the article, though. Widespread glyphosate exposure is documented. Over 80% of Americans aged 6 and older showed detectable levels in their urine, with higher concentrations found in pregnant women and children. I think it was like literally 99% of pregnant women. Scientific studies link the chemicals to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is already the basis for billions of bear settlements, not of settlements. They don't have billions of settlements, billions of dollars in settlements. As well as emerging evidence of gut issue, obesity, diabetes, neurological disorders, and rising autism rates. I've seen tons of evidence, tons of people out there trying to get the word out that glyphosate causes pretty much everything, okay? It causes inflammation as far as, and again, I'm not a doctor. These are the studies I've read, the people I've heard, but they have said that it causes inflammation, which is the root cause, or at least the root symptom, not the cause, the root symptom of pretty much everything. Okay, heart disease, diabetes, many cancers. This is what is a contributing factor in all of them, and glyphosate does increase that. The order contradicts core promises of the Make America Healthy movement, led by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., which pledged to reduce exposure to harmful pesticides as part of addressing the chronic disease epidemic. Kennedy defends the actions as a temporary bridge, arguing a sudden ban would bankrupt farmers and destabilize food production. Again, true. I'm not contradicting that, but here's the thing. I mean, farmers are already going bankrupt, many of them, unfortunately, and this isn't going to change that. They say they're protecting farmers. What they're protecting is not from the lawsuits, because farmers aren't getting sued. They're protecting farmers, I guess you could say, their ability to poison us. They don't do it on purpose. I'm not blaming the farmers for this. There's a whole bunch of them that wish they could go back to the old ways, that wish they could stop using Roundup, stop using the genetically modified seeds that they're forced to use, stop worrying about, oh, if I don't continue to pay the man, what's going to happen to my farm? They feel locked in, and they are in many ways. They will, Monsanto, Bayer, they will go after a farmer if they detect, oh, look, you're using our seeds without buying the seeds from us. It's like, well, no, I just took like last year's crop and I used that to create seeds for this year's crop. Yeah, but you can't, because, farming is about money. The food be damned. He was doing all this, talking about how he'll destabilize food production, while he promotes a gradual shift to regenerative agriculture, organic methods, and non-chemical weed control technologies. Well, here's the thing. Again, and I love RFK Jr. I really do. I think he's a great guy. Okay, and I love President Trump. I really do. I think he's a fantastic guy. But if you're really, as they say here, if you really are trying to promote a gradual shift to regenerative farming, then do more than go on podcasts and say it. Actually do something. Where's the executive order? Where's the declaration? Where's the whatever? Where's the legislation? Give me something. Not just, here's immunity for big ag and send out RFK Jr. to do the circuit. Sorry, this really bugs me. This is something I've been talking about, working towards for decades. Critics view the immunity provision as a betrayal that rewards corporate interest after years of litigation exposed industry awareness of risks, echoing historical patterns seen with tobacco and opioids. A genuine path forward requires shifting subsidies toward soil regeneration, chemical-free farming, investing in biological and precision alternatives, and setting firm timelines for phasing out glyphosate dependency. Yes, 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 and yes. Without enforceable reforms, the order risks undermining public trust in Maha and perpetuating a system that prioritizes short-term agricultural output over the long-term health of American families. So, to break that down, yes, if you were to get rid of glyphosate immediately, quickly, then it would destroy big ag, which feel about that however you will. It would harm farmers. It would dramatically increase food costs, and it would harm America. So that's off the table, unfortunately. I wish that it could be done. But giving immunity to Bayer, to Monsanto, to all these companies out there that have knowingly poisoned us, because keep in mind, that's what the lawsuits aren't about, really, whether or not glyphosate is harmful. That's just acknowledged at this point. The lawsuits are about, when did Bayer know and why didn't they tell us? When did Monsanto know and why didn't they tell us? Why are they still denying it? That's what the lawsuits are about, and now they're gone. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. So, what can we do about it? Obviously, this is one of those issues that does need to be taken up at the ballot box. But if there's anything that this whole glyphosate betrayal has taught us, it's that we must take charge of our own lives and utilize the vote of our wallets, utilize the impact that we can make through localization and through selective bartering. I don't want to say like literally bartering from a survivalist perspective. I'm saying bartering as in, we have money to trade. Let's trade it with the people that are doing it right. This is something that they may prevent us from having wholesale legislative fixes. They may be reticent to put out an executive order that calls for, and I'm not a fan of subsidies, but if you're going to subsidize anybody, let's subsidize and improve the ability for farmers to go regenerative. It's hard, okay? It's not just that the farmers are out there being greedy and, they're using Roundup seeds, they're using all this stuff because they just want to be greedy. That's not the case. They just want to survive. And it's hard, very hard, much harder to buck the system and to go with regenerative farming that replenishes the soil, that keeps it natural, that keeps things organic, that does things the way God wanted us to do. Genetically modified organisms, the GMOs in foods, just in its very name, betrays what the Bible tells us. Okay, we were blessed with amazing foods, especially here in the United States of America, and we have pushed to desecrate the miracle of the abundance of food that we have. Keep in mind, when the whole GMO thing got started under George H.W. Bush, the sales pitch, mind you, how they got us to, how they sold it to Congress, sold it to the administration, the Bush administration, sold it to the people, was that if we can do this, this will help us to feed the children of Africa. I'm not kidding. That was the primary push. It's like, yes, we'll keep food prices down here in America. We'll make it to where we can grow food bigger. We can grow it faster. We can grow it pesticide free. We can make a whole bunch of money for farmers. That's how they hooked them. Okay. This was the pitch. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s when all this was going down. And they said, and we'll be able to feed those starving young people in Ethiopia and across Africa. We'll be able to feed the world. We're going to improve on what was given to us by the Creator. Now, obviously, that isn't what has happened. Not even close. This has only helped to produce greater profits for big ag and to take full control over the agricultural industry, the farmers here in the United States of America. The vast majority of them are beholden. Reluctantly so in many cases. Other cases, a lot of farmers just don't care, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. Okay, do what's best for you, right? That's what they're doing, and this helps them to survive. So here's, going back to the original premise, what can we do about it? We have to, you must, and I want you to do this right now. Go find, if you haven't already, I know that many, if not most of you already have, go find your local markets, your local farmers markets. Drive extra miles if you have to. Get onto services. There's plenty of services online. We subscribe to one out here in California that brings us amazing food from local farmers. They drop it off every Thursday morning, technically. Wednesday night, Thursday morning, overnight. They put out a box on our doorstep. They deliver it to us. It's got amazing food. And the food tastes better. It's healthier. It's all organic, all regenerative. Love it. It's expensive, unfortunately. But it doesn't have to be. Okay? Is regenerative food more expensive because it's just that much harder to create? In part, but it's also because there's just not enough. There's just not enough of it out there. We need more, and we need to support those farmers. We need to support the local ones. We need to do everything we can in our power to do our part. So number one, pray. That's the best thing you can do in pretty much every situation. Number two, pray for your farmers. Pray for President Trump and RFK Jr. to open their eyes, okay? Because I think their eyes have been shut to this issue. They feel backed into a corner, and they're doing something that neither of them want to do, especially Kennedy. He doesn't want to do this, okay? He's a captive in all this. I truly believe that. He wishes that, and that's what he's expressing. He wishes that we could wean ourselves off of glyphosate and Roundup and just go natural, go organic. I truly believe that, but he's also a bureaucrat now. He's got to do what's best. He's got to do what the administration wants, or he can take a hike. Those are his options, and he doesn't like either of them. So there should have been whatever. I'm not going to relitigate that. So yeah, number two, eat local, buy local, as much of it as possible. Number three, you focus on the local legislature, because we're not going to get it passed. We're not going to get anything passed in the House or the Senate that will promote regenerative and organic farming. Nothing. But it can happen in the states. And it doesn't matter. Here's one of those rare circumstances where it doesn't matter if you're in a red state or a blue state. You can promote this. You can push this. And it is a bipartisan issue. There are people that are against it on both sides. There's a whole bunch of people especially on Capitol Hill, but also in state legislatures and governor's offices that are in part owned by big food, big pharma, and big ag. So you got to expose them, but in the meantime, push for legislation. Make it to where, again, I'm not trying to outlaw glyphosate, though that would be nice. I'm saying push for legislation that will help to promote, to lift up natural foods, truly natural foods. I'm not saying, all natural, whatever. Okay, most of the labels, I need to do a show on this. Most of the labels are fake, false, whatever. Maybe not most, a lot of them. But you want to look for no GMO. You definitely want to look for regenerative. And really, the best way to do it is to personally source, which brings me number three, source all of your foods. Okay? You should know where all of anything that you or your family eats, you should know where it comes from, what's done to it. You should know about the company. You should research all this stuff. And I know that sounds like a lot of work. It's your health. It's America. Okay? Just do it. Just do it. The only way, and this incident proves it to us, the only way we can truly make America healthy again is if we make ourselves healthy again. And if we can spread the word, get it out to make sure that your closest friends, your relatives all know the dangers of glyphosate, the reasons to go regenerative. Tell them why they should explain better than I just explained why they should be supporting local farmers, local ranchers, why they should be especially supporting those who are promoting a regenerative farming. If we start doing that, if enough of us start doing that, then it won't matter what happens in Washington, D.C. It won't matter what executive orders come down. It won't matter what sort of immunity bears given, because they will be forced to get with the program. Is it a long shot? You betcha. But who cares? It's the right thing to do. Gold and silver are definitely hot right now. Now, before you go out and you buy a bunch of numismatics or collectible coins or whatever, do one of those gold IRAs, you should know the truth about physical precious metals. And if you are considering learning the truth, you are considering getting gold and silver, whether it's going to be through cash purchase or a rollover of your retirement account, the best place to do that is to go to jdrucker.com/gold, jdrucker.com/gold. That will just take you to advisorbullion.com when you can talk to my good friend Ira over there. He'll take care of you. If you are watching this show or listening to this podcast, chances are you're a prepper, whether you know it or not. Some of you just embrace it. You're just like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I be a prepper? Duh. And then others are like, no, I'm definitely not a prepper. I don't prepare. What's the point of being a prepper for situations that aren't ever going to happen or are very unlikely to happen? Well, let me ask you this: if you fall into that latter category, do you have in your home? Do you have smoke alarms? Maybe a fire extinguisher or fire blankets or anything like that? If you do, guess what? You're a prepper. You're a fire prepper. You're prepared for the unlikely but possible event that your home catches on fire and you want to survive it. You don't want to be stuck asleep and waiting for the smoke to wake you up or not, waiting for the flames to wake you up or not. You're prepared for that possibility, unlikely as it may be. Being a prepper, the difference between being a regular prepper and a doomsday prepper is that a doomsday prepper takes into account more possible negative actions, more possible negative circumstances. That's it. You're already a prepper to some extent. Do you have a spare tire? Well, you're prepared for the unlikely but possible scenario where one of your tires blows out or goes flat. That's called preparedness. We'll call it automotive catastrophe preparedness. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Point is that extending that mindset to more emergencies, more situations, that's what is required to be a full-blown prepper. And this is something that's been near and dear to my heart for a very long time. I've done this podcast off and on for years, and we are very focused on putting it out there every day, maybe every other day. We'll see how it goes. I've got a ton of content to cover, so we might be doing sometimes 2 a day. We will see. This is why I have partnered with my good friends over at Heaven's Harvest. They do a fantastic job there. They're faith-driven. They have amazing, high-quality, American-made food, American-grown food they sell that has shelf life of up to 25 years, sometimes more. You can check them out by going to patriot.tv/food, patriot.tv/food. Let's get into this about why you're a prepper, whether you know it or not. We have this article posted over at discern.tv titled, "You're a Prepper, You Just Don't Know It Yet." And maybe you do know it. Look, if you're sitting there, you're already going down the road of full preparedness. You're learning, you're gathering, you're storing, you're planning, you're spreading the word. That doesn't mean that this article, this podcast, is not for you, but you can check it out and read the whole thing over at discern.tv. I'm just going to go over some of the bullet points to keep this relatively short. As I noted earlier, most Americans are already practicing basic preparedness without realizing it. Savings accounts, for example, smoke detectors, spare tires, and first aid kits are all forms of prepping, just never labeled as such. Who cares what the labels are? I always have to be very clear about that. I don't care whether you think I'm crazy or not. It doesn't affect how I protect myself, protect my family, and prepare for whatever is to come. Now, of course, this goes without saying, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Let's turn off the screen real quick there. The only required form of preparedness is the preparedness of your soul. You can have all the stockpiles of food and ammunition and meds. You could have a perfect bunker. You could be completely off the grid, locked away. Nobody even knows that you exist, let alone where you are. And you're ready for hurricanes and whatever, wormwood. You're ready for it all. But your soul is the only thing that actually has to be prepared. And you can prepare your soul by believing in your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Repenting, being baptized in the Spirit. These are the things, the only things that are absolutely required of you. And you might be there, atheist, agnostic, some other religion, and thinking to yourself, no, I don't need any of that. And I'm not going to force feed it to you. I'm just going to tell you, yes, you do. Which is why, to me, the only true necessity for a prepper to get started is having your own Bible, a paper version of your Bible, a book. You can. That doesn't mean that you have to use it all the time. I know a lot of people like to use apps on their phones or websites because it's easier to read, easier to cross-reference. I get it, but you never know when that's going to disappear, and you don't want to get caught without a Bible. So make sure you've got a Bible or 2 or 10 available to you, physical Bibles at all times. So the biggest barrier to preparedness isn't cost or complexity, even though it can be expensive, and it is complex to some extent. It's as complex as you make it. You can get a full-blown prepper lifestyle going, and that can be very complex, but it can also be very rewarding. But it doesn't have to be. It can be very basic, very simple, not much thought to it, as long as you put some thought to it. But the biggest risk is the cultural stigma associated with, attached to the word prepper, a caricature shaped by Hollywood and legacy media that has kept millions of sensible people away from taking practical steps. Again, you might say, I don't want to be a prepper, but if you've got a fire alarm, you're already a fire prepper. Okay? If you've got a spare tire, you're already an automotive prepper. Just expand on those concepts. The idea here is to be ready in case of an unlikely catastrophic event. You don't have to be that guy sitting there like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, There's going to be an EMP attack on the United States of America within the next 10 days. Okay, I've seen it. Or I was watching this projection and it says the big one's going to hit California this month or whatever. You don't have to be that person. You just have to be ready for whatever is situationally presented to you. It's probably the easiest way to put it. Effective preparedness follows a 4-step sequence. And that sequence is, number 1, assess your risks. It's different for everybody. Okay, if you live in Florida, you got hurricanes. If you live in Montana, you don't. If you live in Montana, you could have massive snowstorms. You're probably not going to get that in Florida. I say probably. You never know. But I don't think you're going to get that in Florida. But knowing, and it's not just about weather either. It can be other certain circumstances. Look, I have to admit, and this is where I get a little bit too paranoid, but I have a concern about Yellowstone. I would love that area. I love being near there. That would be amazing. But there's just the thought of the quote unquote super volcano erupting. On one hand, it's like, okay, cool. Well, we're done in an instant, right? It's like, check out. On the other hand, it's like, maybe I don't want to be right around there if anything were to happen. And that's an irrational fear, to be clear. And it's okay to have certain irrational fears. Now, you don't want to live irrationally, but we all have irrational fears of some sort. They're called phobias in many cases, and other times, like in the case of my concerns about Yellowstone, that shouldn't be weighing in on my decision, because the likelihood of Yellowstone erupting in my lifetime is so minimal. Like it's barely a blip. I could win a lottery with the same types of odds, but it's still there. It's irrational. It does impact me, and that's okay. As long as you don't have a whole bunch of those, as long as you're not making your decisions based upon your phobias and fears, you're making decisions based upon being ready and prepared for things that are realistically possible, like a flat tire, like a hurricane in Florida. Okay? Those are realistic. So, just wanted to throw that out there. Realistic threats for most Americans are far less exotic than EMPs or nuclear events. Both are possible, and it's not to say that it's bad to prepare for them, but that shouldn't be where you start. Okay, if you're just getting started, or you're part of the way into the prepper lifestyle, the prepper mindset is what it really is, then EMPs, yeah, that could happen. Nuclear attack, sure, that could happen, but there are other emergencies that require more attention, because they are just more likely. Period. Let's see, where was I? Yeah. EMP attacks. Oh, you know what? I didn't finish the list. Let me go back to that real quick. I stopped on assess your risk. That's step 1 of this 4-step sequence. Step 2, make a plan. Step 3, build your kits. And step 4, continuously improve. And that last one is super important. You don't want to be stagnant in your preparedness, because things change. The world's changing so fast. The risks are changing so fast. If you would have told somebody 5 years ago that there's a tremendous risk of a some sort of AI apocalypse, they would have laughed at you. And we're talking again 5 years ago. They'd have been like, "Oh no, AI is just barely a blip. It's not going to take over. It's not going to be used to hack the grid. It's not going to be able to become self-defensive and spread across the internet like Ultron and the Avengers. No, don't worry about it. You're crazy." Well, now all of that's possible. Maybe not the Ultron part, but who knows? Maybe they have that as well. So continuously improve, extremely important. Now back to the realistic threats for most Americans are far less exotic than EMPs or nuclear events. House fires, we've covered that. Home invasions, be armed. Have it ready, have a plan. Make sure everybody's trained. Make sure you have everything properly stored away in the appropriate safes and spots, right? Duh. Regional natural disasters, we covered those. There are many, depending upon where you are. Those all top the probability lists and deserve preparation priority before anything else. Personal health. Now, this is another thing that when you're trying to assess your risks, don't just look at your environment. Look at yourself, look at your family members. Personal health and financial stability are underrated preparedness factors. A chronic illness left unmanaged or a household with no emergency fund represents a vulnerability no amount of canned goods can offset. And that is so true. I have a friend. I have an acquaintance, we'll say. Somebody I haven't talked to. I need to give this person a call now that I think about it. But I have an acquaintance who had spent a lot of money on prepper stuff. And they ended up having to put it all in storage because they had a financial downturn. They had to move out and get a little apartment. And then that financial downturn turned really awful. They end up losing their storage. He had spent probably, $20,000-$30,000 over the years accumulating survival stuff, and it's all gone. And it's sad because it's gone because he didn't have enough money to continue living where he was living. And he lived in San Francisco. So, it's one of the highest cost of living areas out there. But it's also an area where, my gosh, they've already gone through their own series of events, obviously pertaining mostly to earthquakes, but also fires. And, it's San Francisco has challenges, and that's not even taking into account the possibility for Antifa riots or just odd wokeness. It's a disaster. But anyway, I wouldn't live in San Francisco. I love the city, by the way. I've been there many times. I just wouldn't want to live there. Point being is that, yes, financial preparedness is extremely important, and you need to take that into account. That's why it's mentioned in the article about savings accounts, right? I get it. I would rather have a safe with gold and silver, preferably plenty of silver, small little coins, preferably, maybe some Bitcoin and cash. The savings important, but savings is different for everybody. Retirement savings, that's a different story because that has certain tax advantages. I'm not saying go cash in your IRA and turn it into Bitcoin, though that's not necessarily a horrible idea, depending upon what you think about cryptocurrencies today. I digress. Sorry, not. They said money, and I start talking about retirement. Yeah, that happened. A meaningful emergency foundation can be built for under $100. Seriously, just getting 3 days worth of canned foods and a few gallons of water, right? That's the beginning of preparedness. The FEMA always says 72 hours. Be ready for 72 hours of outages, and we've seen that play out. We saw it play out in 2021, Texas blizzards that knocked out power, and people died. We've seen it play out in other natural disasters and emergencies. It's important to have at least 72 hours. That's your basis. That's your foundation. That's that's the bare minimum that every single household in the United States of America should have, which is 72 hours of full-blown preparedness and ready to survive for at least 72. And you might think that wouldn't be hard. I've fasted for 72 hours myself many times. So what's the problem here? The water part is the problem, but we'll cover that some other day. And we will always cover that. Water is the least covered and most important aspect of survival in any situation. Any situation. Last but not least, the plea. This is where I hope that you heed my advice. According to the article, it says self-reliance is not paranoia. Now, my paranoia about Yellowstone, that might be border on the paranoid. But for the most part, being ready for these natural or unnatural disasters, it's not paranoia. The average American household has only about 3 days worth of food on hand. Fewer than half have a written emergency plan, and most families have never discussed what they would do in an evacuation scenario. Being able to know how to respond to emergencies and making sure that everyone in your circle of influence, obviously your family members, preferably some of your friends and neighbors, it's insane that this isn't understood and practiced by everyone. It's to the point that I would almost say it should be mandated. It should not mandated like, oh, you must be prepared. I'm saying mandated as part of education curriculum. People should be taught this so that they can spread. And kids in high school should be taught about the need for a preparedness plan. They should be walked through it all, and then they can help to educate their parents. It could be co-learning. And if I would argue that probably 90% of homeschoolers out there, we're already well on our way to being full-blown preppers if we're not already. Okay? But what about public schools, even private schools? I think there should be some sort of encouragement. I don't want to mandate it, but encouragement to make preparedness and survival a portion of our education. There's never been a time where that is more important. Because keep in mind, in the old days, we live in an age of massive prosperity here in the United States of America. Even with downturns, even with inflation, even with rampant homelessness, for the most part, we are still a very rich nation. But if you look back throughout our history, there were times when prepping or survival weren't concepts that people would care about. The reason that they didn't care about it is because it was already embedded in their lifestyles. They lived lives as preppers because the emergencies weren't something that could be rare. They were part of their day-to-day lives. Okay, living out, whether they were living in Boston or out in the Great Plains, traveling, doing the Oregon Trail, trying to escape dysentery. Their lifestyles were lifestyles of preparedness, preparing for whatever emergency could strike them. They would always, just as an example, they would always carry, when they were traveling, they would have in these groups, a lot of times they would have anti-venom. Okay, you might think, oh, well, what are the chances of getting bit by a rattlesnake in my apartment in Baltimore? Probably put it pretty thin, in which case you probably don't need to have anti-venom on hand. But if you're on your way to the Oregon Trail or along the Oregon Trail, then yeah, back then that was something important. Today is different. Our version of preparedness is based upon a wider array of uncontrollable circumstances. In other words, what they used to have to deal with on a daily basis were hard, but they were commonplace. Today, we're hit with a wide array of mostly technological risks, right? Because, just as an example, we are not prepared for a full-blown grid shutdown if it were to happen. Not just because of the electricity, but mostly because of the water. If the water pumps stop, if that magical little faucet device in your kitchens and bathrooms, if that stops pouring out water on demand, many, if not most Americans will be completely lost. Like, holy crap, what do I do? I can't go to the grocery store because that's being looted. I can't, I don't know where the nearest well is, not by a river or a lake. What the heck? How am I going to get water? And you will quickly learn that you need water if you don't have water. Okay? That's you have to look at the world around you, not as an area of danger, but an area of opportunity for both natural and unnatural disasters. Again, I point to AI. The potential for hackers taking down the grid is obviously higher now than it was just a year or two ago. The potential for physical attacks, terrorist attacks. And yes, we can say what we want about climate change. I'm not exactly a fan of the quote unquote fake science behind it, but the political science behind it. But the climate, what we like to call weather, does sometimes turn south. It sometimes gets bad, regardless of where you are. I'm out here in Southern California, and the weather is almost always pristine. I've become so spoiled out here after nearly 2 decades when it comes to weather. I mean, I was living in Oklahoma. Watching the weather was something you did every day. People talked about the weather literally every day. Why? Because the weather changed so constantly. Here, it doesn't. But then again, I have to worry about at any moment there could be a major earthquake. And being prepared for that scenario, it does require a different mindset than those in Oklahoma. So keep all that in mind. You are already a prepper. You just don't know it yet. And maybe you do. Maybe that's why you're watching this. But those 4 steps, and again, you can read the full article over at discern.tv. Those 4 steps are everything to get started. You don't need anything else. Now, we will talk about getting, full-blown preparedness, bug-out bags, bug-in scenarios. I'm a big fan of this concept of becoming the hub, turning your home, depending on where you are, turning your home into the hub for not just you and your family's survival, but also for others, for the people that you care about. We talk about what's the plan if there's an emergency. In my book, if you have the means, if you have the size, if you have the right home for it, you should turn your home into the hub for the rally point. This is, hey, if there's a massive emergency, if there's an invasion, EMP, bears, zombies, whatever, meet back at the Rucker House. That's actually what we have going for us. I want to expand upon that. And I think other people should. Oh, wow. I'm dragging this. Point being is that you are a prepper. So act accordingly. Be prepared. Be diligent. But most importantly, make sure that your soul is prepared. Pray daily. Ask for forgiveness. Repent. And make sure that those around you are also aware and striving for salvation. Food security really is a national security issue. It's undeniable. It's been that way since the dawn of humanity. Any nation that can feed its people is in better shape than a nation that cannot. But it's not just at the national level. Food security is something that we as Americans should take responsibility for, should be reliant on ourselves for as much as possible. Now, I'm a huge fan of truly taking care of yourself, right? I mean, getting not necessarily off-grid, but maybe off-grid, getting yourself a homestead or at least a big garden, get yourself some chickens or goats or whatever, cows if you can, if you've got the space, and making sure that you can feed yourself, feed your family, and then, if you have abundance, that you can help to feed your community. It should be localized as much as possible. And if you don't have the ability to do that, so be it. Work with your local farmers and local ranchers. These are things that we as Americans should be doing in preparation for whatever's to come. And here's the thing. Let's say nothing bad happens. Awesome. Praise God. It's still good to know your local ranchers, your local farmers, or to be growing your own food as much as possible. But for many of us, being able to secure that is just not as easy as going out and getting a homestead. It's one of the reasons that I work very closely with my very good friends over at Heaven's Harvest. They have done a fantastic job of putting together a true long-term storage food solution. That is, it's all American. They use heirloom seeds. They only use the good stuff. They produce the types of food buckets and food bags and heirloom seeds that Americans need. Go to patriot.tv/food, patriot.tv/food. Use promo code PATRIOT, and you'll get a very nice discount. And really, take advantage. Take advantage of this discount. Take advantage of this opportunity before it's too late.